Okay, this webinar is now being recorded. I want to welcome everybody to our time together. It's great to have you all here. It's just wonderful that we can use this great technology to connect from around the country and around the world. So I want you all to make sure that you've got the arrow key on your video section panned down so that you can see Pat Molyneaux. He's at the bottom of my screen right here. I can see you loudly and clear, Pat. But I want to make sure everybody's got video on Pat Molyneaux, our guest today. So what we're going to talk about is building organizational culture where everyone flourishes. And we have this unique opportunity today to talk to Pat Molyneaux and hear from him. Pat is the co-owner of Molyneaux Tile, Carpet, and Wood. And this is the largest flooring company in the Pittsburgh area, and also one of the top 10 independent or family-owned flooring companies in the Northeast part of the United States. So Pat has used Mcore. He's also a StrengthsFinder trained, and also uses other assessments, an assessment that he's going to talk about called APEST, and the business version of that, but uses Mcore with these other assessments to help all flourish. And not simply employees, but also customers and partners as well. And has had a very successful year. I believe the best year in the history of the company last year, where this has been a real focus. So Pat is a good friend. He's a strong promoter of Mcore. Has had a lot of people trained in it and personally uses it. And so I just want to welcome Pat today. Who's also, I want to mention this too, the founder of the Human Formation Coalition. And this is an ecumenical group in the Pittsburgh area with branches kind of rapidly extending around the country. But the focus here is on helping people discern and cultivate the design that God gave them so that they can flourish as well. And beyond that, he's done a lot of great ministry work in the Pittsburgh area, but really understands that part of the call of the layperson is to just renew and help companies flourish, help people flourish, and just bring about an elevation of the common good. So Pat, thanks for being here. Welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for the intro, Josh. And I just want to affirm you because you've been a mentor to me. We've been now friends for a couple of years, and I just am thankful for the impact you've had on my life. So thanks, Josh.
Friendship. Tell us more about yourself and what brought you to the point where, particularly as a business person, living out your own vocation, you're focusing on building culture where everyone flourishes.
Yes, I always say that Molyneaux is in the human flourishing business. And oh, by the way, we sell flooring. So that's how we function. And we get it right sometimes, and sometimes we don't. I mean, sometimes we're human and we make mistakes. And several years, let me just say this, my background, I'm a Christian, and I try to live my faith the best I can. And several years ago, just started becoming very involved in starting various ministries and apostolates. And about 5 years ago, started to explore leadership development in church contexts. And that's how I met you, Josh. And really started to uncover some of the incredible biblical truths of leadership. I believe that everything we need to know about leadership is in the Bible. It's just a matter of unpacking it and contextualizing it for our marketplace contexts. So a little bit about me. So on Mcore, my top 3 are to achieve potential, to explore, and to overcome. My fundamental motivational statement, integrated statement, is I am fundamentally motivated to explore new pathways and overcome challenges to help persons, teams, and organizations achieve their latent potential. And then my bottom 3 Mcore motivations are be central, evoke recognition, and make the grade. And it's funny, Josh connected me with my human formation / life coach, Joe Cavanaugh. When Joe coached me, he said, Pat, looking at your bottom 3 Mcore motivations and looking at your strengths profile from StrengthsFinders, you really don't care what people think, do you? And I said, well, I didn't know I was supposed to, Joe. So he's working with me right now on that. That's a shadow side. And then on strengths, I'm high in influencing. I'm high in strategic thinking, but I'm low in relational, and I'm super low in execution. So I have great ideas. I'm good at moving people from point A to point B, but I need to be around executors who can help me implement, and people who have more relational capacity, like my wife. She's a highly relational, and my HR person. So, and then an APEST, another tool that we use in our coaching based on Ephesians 4, apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, shepherd, teacher. I'm high in the apostolic and prophetic style. So that's what I do. My style is more catalytic, and I need to be in context of well-rounded teams to function effectively.
So a lot of business folks talk about, bottom line revenue, and it's important, of course, for businesses to make money. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in existence. That's not a primary focus of Molyneaux. A lot of businesses also talk about employee engagement. Of course, that is a good, right? We want our employees not to just be producing money for us, but also to be engaged. But Molyneaux goes beyond that and really concentrates on holistic flourishing. So tell us about how you're brought to that, and really how that takes place on a day-to-day basis in your business context.
So those of you on this call who do a lot of organizational consulting understand people, process, technology. And do you want to pull up that slide, Josh, if you have it?
Just about to go there. Yep.
I believe that it's people, process, technology, but in context of the dignity of the human person and human flourishing. So I believe that we need to move toward a more human-centric leadership model. And I believe when we do that, or if we do that, we really will build a high-performance culture. And you're seeing a lot of this right now. I spent 3 days this past January down in Texas for Patrick Lencioni's annual conference. And he's now talking about how he wants to create a movement that integrates high performance and high dignity. And it's incredible. I mean, I've watched him evolve over the last several years. I've been trained in some of his material to take it into organizations. And I looked and I was so excited. I sent to Joshua, I don't know if you have this, but on Friday, I was so excited. My executive coach, Dan Dupuy, sent me the front cover of the Harvard Business Review. And it's an article by Marcus Livingston called The Feedback Fallacy. And
Marcus Buckingham.
Marcus Buckingham, sorry. The Feedback Fallacy. And it really talks about appreciative inquiry coaching and vision and organizational development. So I feel like with the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, with the way millennials are really tough to engage, I think that the models of leading people 15, 20 years ago are from a bygone era. I think if we want to really build competitive advantage, we need to move into a model that honors the uniqueness of the human person.
How do you do that at Molyneaux?
Well, we're still trying to figure it out, but we're making progress. So actually, I will share with you, Josh, and you know this, but obviously those on the call don't. I really didn't learn about this until I started working in the church. And I found out in the church that they're supposed to be honoring the uniqueness of the person because we're all made in the image of God, but they don't really do a very good job at it. So through my experience in the church, I really started to deploy it in my business. So I hired, through your referral, I hired Joe Cavanaugh from Equip to Equip, I don't know, 3 years ago, and brought him in. And we started off with probably a year or 2 years of just a deep dive into strength finders to really identify the natural talents of our people and honoring them according to how they're designed and building teams according to how they're designed. And I will say that one of the most humbling experiences for me in my 30 years helping to lead this organization was when Joe got me together with my top key collaborators in the organization and put on a chart, my DNA, which showed that I have like no execution skills. And it was like my people finally understood why I drive them crazy. I'm not wired as an executor. And it was humbling for me, but we are building an organization where we create mutually interdependent relationships. So that's how it plays out. We're all about team.
Yep.
And core values and the flourishing of the person. And I got to be honest with you, like some days, like I will tell you that this has been probably one of the hardest quarters I've been in my business. We're doing well, but we are making changes around process and technology that are so painful for my people. And if you ask them, they aren't feeling like they're flourishing right now. Mm-hmm. But we are trying to be very respectful of them and their personhood through the process, making major changes on process and technology that'll really help us gain competitive advantage long term.
So I understand from, like, Joe's done a lot of coaching in your organization, and I've trained several people who use Mcore alongside StrengthsFinder. Talk to us about the use of Mcore alongside StrengthsFinder and how that plays out with your people as they get coached, and the impact of that. Love to hear some impact stories.
So my experience, and this is what I learned from Joe Cavanaugh, and we practice this very deeply in our ministry, Human Formation Coalition, training leaders across the country and churches. But I've learned it in my business too, that strength finders, we started out with strength finders because we find it to be very catalytic, because you're really affirming people according to their natural abilities. And then when you build a culture that honors the uniqueness according to the 4 domains of strengths, then you start to really dive into their motivational patterns. So when I have my one-on-ones every week with my team, my direct reports, I do it over Zoom from this very desk. This is my home office. I have my meetings in the morning from this office at home. And I have for each of my direct reports, I have my Strength Finders grid, which shows where they're at according to the various domains. And then I have their motivational profiles. I'll give you an example. So one of my guys, he's an incredible employee. I love him. He's been with us for a long time. And he said to me, he's been 30 years using graph paper and pencils to measure his jobs. And we're moving toward a totally automated system where he's got to use a laser, it goes into the computer. And he's really not very technologically savvy, and I'm working with him. But he said to me, he said, "Pat, you talk about honoring the uniqueness of the person." And I said, but I'm really having a hard time with this. And I said, "Ron, we're going to take time and we're going to work with you. We're going to coach you." But I said, "Ron, at the end of the day, your number one motivation is to make it work. And Ron, I've known you for 15 years, and you will find a way to make this work." And he said, "Pat, you know me, I will. I love making things work." So that's a way, his number one core motivation is to make it work. So it's me leaning into their design to help them flourish.
And talk about other examples where you've gotten people to connect in with one another based upon their design. Yeah. And by design here, we're looking at strengths, of course. We're also looking at underlying motivation.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Josh, I'm gonna give a detour through what we do with churches.
Sure.
And those leaders, because let's face it, I mean, churches are some of the most dysfunctional organizations on the planet. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. It is what it is. So what we do with churches and church leaders, Catholic, Protestant, and mostly Catholic we work with, is we take them through a deep dive into strengths, which is how they do things, natural abilities. And then we take them through Mcore, which is obviously why they do things, motivational patterns. And then we take them through a tool called APES. We believe that there's latent genius in Ephesians 4:1-16, unity, diversity, maturity. Some are apostles, some are prophets, some are evangelists, some are shepherds, some are teachers. Those 5 kind of, we call them ministry styles. The apostle's the pioneer. The prophet is the kind of the motivator who challenges status quo. The evangelist is the champion, the recruiter. The shepherd is kind of the advisor, the counselor, and the teacher is the thinker. So we work with teams in churches around those fivefold ministries because Jesus had all five of them. So I came into the APES, actually through Lisa Slayton at Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation, turned me on to APES when I was under their formation probably 4 or 5 years ago. And what I saw was that APES really models the ideal organization because you need the entrepreneur, you need the person who challenges status quo, you need the recruiter, the salesperson, you need the shepherd, the HR person, you need the teacher, the thinker, that's IT, that's legal, that's all the kind of very detail-oriented tasks. So actually through that, I saw the vision of how this could be applicable in marketplace context. So I connected Alan Hirsch with a friend of mine, Rick Newton, who does leadership development. And I connected those two 2.5 years ago. And I said to them, guys, we need a marketplace version of Ephesians 4, 1 through 16. So literally, as we speak, they're rolling out a beta test on something that is called Impact. And I think it's mpactq.com. And it's really a tool used based on Ephesians 4, 1 through 16, that helps persons see their impact on a team, whether it's in a church, ministry context, or Rick Newton and Alan's new tool, which is coming out next 30 days, is impact in context of a marketplace organization. So Molyneaux will probably be one of the first organizations in the country to beta test that. So to answer your question, I'm a connector. So Strength Finders, my number one is connector. I'm an activator. I like to make things happen. I'm number 3 is learner. I study, I explore. Number 4 is arranger. I like to arrange all the pieces. And then I'm high command and self-assurance. So 5 and 6 are self-assurance and command. So high and influencing. So I make things happen. I have the ability to see the connections.
So we're feeling right now that motivational energy, particularly around the explore piece, the potential piece, and also just your drive to impact and move things forward. So what I'm going to do is just quickly pull up on the website that impact site. Okay.
Yeah, do that.
Just to
while he's pulling that up, while you're pulling that up, Josh, one of the things that our nonprofit Human Formation Coalition is doing is we are going to train Josh to take coaches, Mcore coaches, through the integration of strengths and APEST. And after this beta test is done and the tool is validated, the impact tool, God willing, we're going to also equip Josh to train coaches on this marketplace version alongside strength. So we believe that when you start to really pay attention to their natural abilities, their motivational drives, and the way they impact teams, what they bring to a team, we think it's dynamite because we've seen it work in churches. We've seen transformation in church contexts using those 3 tools.
All right, so people can see this screen here and then take note of the website. So if you'd like to take this like really brand new cutting edge team-oriented assessment that will be linked with Mcore, you can go on the site for that. We'll talk about how this plays out in a business context. Do you use APEST or a version of it yet in a business context alongside Mcore?
Let me give a personal narrative, and then I'll talk about where we're going to try to deploy this at Molyneaux and in business contexts. So one of the reasons I resonated, so those of you who know APEST would know this language. So on the fivefold, I am on Alan Hirsch's, if you're going to do APEST, Google Alan Hirsch APEST. I think the website is 5q.com or something like that. On APEST, I am 47 apostolic, 45 prophetic, and I'm like under 20 in, I'm like 19 evangelist, and I'm under 10 in shepherd and teacher. I have like no shepherd sensibilities. I'm off the charts high apostolic prophetic. And when you have that kind of a ministry style in a Catholic context, it really can be challenging and problematic because you annoy a lot of people, basically. So when I got a hold of this, I really resonated with it. And I believe that it's so applicable also. If you look at the entrepreneurs who usually start companies, they're off the charts, apostolic prophetic. And then typically what happens is over time, because they codify and systemize things, the shepherds and teachers take over and the company has less of its entrepreneurial drive. So in church contexts, you really need to have all 5 typologies working together: apostolic, prophetic, evangelist, shepherd, teacher. And those of you who work with churches know that if you think of the early church, high apostolic, high prophetic, high evangelistic, then when the shepherd and teacher functions became more dominant, they basically exiled the apes. So what happens in a lot of marketplace contexts is the same things. You get teams together, and the high catalytic types, the apes we call them in church talk, generally are exiled and the shepherd teachers take over. So really, in impact, when we deploy that at Molyneaux, it'll be how do we get along better in context of a team. I think impact will be a game changer for organizational development. That's my prediction.
So why does that kind of an assessment need Mcore, and how does Mcore also need these other kinds of approaches to have a fuller picture?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Josh. So this one of the great books out there I've been really studying and trying to embody is by Liz Wiseman. She was a talent person at I think Oracle. Multipliers: How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. Great book. And she talks about unlocking the latent potential of people. So my experience in my business, but even more so in my ministry with these churches that we work with, is that when you unlock natural abilities, strengths, motivational patterns, Mcore, in ministry styles or in the secular context, what you bring to a team, how you impact a team, I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, I believe that people generally are only operating at a fraction. I think Liz Wiseman makes the point in this book that people are operating at maybe 40 or 50% of their true latent capacity and potential. We paid more attention to their DNA and unlocked it.
Mm-hmm.
That make sense?
Totally. Yep.
Yeah.
So you gave an example of a guy who's been doing you've been working with for several years, who is driven to make things work. Any other examples of either teams in action at Molyneaux or individuals that have been blessed by the fruit of good coaching around these assessment approaches?
Yeah. So let me just I'm gonna put on my critical hat for a second. So one of my frustrations is the use, and this was actually, I think, the genius of this front page article in this issue of Harvard Business Review. Mm-hmm. What I call the dysfunction of these cookie cutter 360s. So what I'm doing, my executive coach, Dan Dupuy, he's actually meeting, he would be on this call, he's meeting with my team right now. And I'm going to have Dan do a narrative 360 of all my direct reports and my peers, my sister and my niece, and map me against our core values, our mission, vision, values, but also in context of my DNA. So Joe Cavanaugh is working, my life coach is working with Dan on, what's Pat's DNA? Because when we do this 360, if they want Pat Molyneaux to be a better executor, it's probably not going to happen. But is Pat Molyneaux intentional about building a team where he leans into those who have the execution skills? So I think that a human-centric or a DNA-driven 360 is really, in my opinion, the only way to do a 360 that honors the uniqueness of the person. I mean, there could be other ways. I don't mean to be hypercritical, but in my context, working in my business and the work we do in the churches, I'm really looking at building and perfecting a narrative-based 360 that honors DNA. Does that make sense, Josh?
It does. As opposed to a kind of 360 where the focus is on providing feedback on what's not going well or what you need to work on. One of the things that I noticed about that Harvard Business Review article is that literally neurologically, people have much lower synaptic connections in areas where they're weak. And if we try to sort of pump that up and focus attention there, there's literally a fraction or a lower amount of synaptic connections than in those areas where neurologically we have strength. And that when we concentrate on developing those areas where we have strength, there's already a strong network of synaptic connections there. And the growth can be much, much more optimal, much more exponential. So when we apply that to a situation where we're just getting negative feedback, it's literally like speaking into a void at times.
Yeah.
At least an area where there's not much potential for fertile growth.
I want to make so one of the areas where I'm weak that Joe Cavanaugh is working with, and Dan will be working with me on this, is so in Strength Finders, I'm high influencing, so activator, command, self-assurance. So I can hammer people if I'm not careful. And one of the ways I hammer people is I project myself on them. Mm-hmm. And, Joe said to me, I'm the only person he's coached like 4,000 people on strengths. He said, I'm the only person he's ever coached that had command and self-assurance are the two rarest. I think I'm the only person he's coached with those two, and they're top 6. Mm-hmm. And part of the downside of that is I project myself on other people. So it's easy for me to move people from point A to point B. It's easy for me because I'm a thinker, ideation, futuristic, to see things, high connectedness, to see vision, to see things systemically. Mm. And I tend to project that on other people, and it's a problem. And I got to constantly remind myself, and I really have a hard time with people that are high execution and high relational, and I have to really work through that with them. But I need those people. Like my HR person, Viv Pagone, I mean, she's incredible. She's almost all relationship. My wife, almost all relationship in her top 5. My wife is the inverse. You know that, Josh. My wife, she's the inverse of me. Sweetness
incarnate. So I'm going to ask you an off-the-cuff question here. Sure. How can you leverage your motivation to explore, achieve potential, and overcome? How can you leverage those deep motivational drives to deal with some of the shadow side of a command and self-assurance that can be like a bulldozer?
Yeah. Well, I think that I got to achieve potential. I am all about achieving the best for people, finding a way, exploring a way, number 2, explore to do that. So a lot of the work we've done in this organization, what I have Dan Dupuy doing with my leaders at this very moment, he's with them working through this. And I had a little talk with him earlier this morning, before that meeting. So really just building systems and structures around me that help. And Dan's actually highly relational. His number 1 is positivity. He's, as you know him, he's highly relational, very gifted. So really it's all about mutually interdependent relationships. It's, it's like the Bible. It's, again, another genius of the Bible, one body, many parts. Right. I mean, I have an MBA, and I've had to unlearn to make this business what it is with my sister, my brother, and my niece, all of us working together. I've had to unlearn a lot of what I learned in the MBA school, Josh.
And how does that relate to a focus on human flourishing?
Well, I think, so I'm a CPA and an MBA. So if you look at this people, process, technology, that's Accenture. Accenture is Arthur Andersen, the same people that gave us Enron. This has always been their model. I think people is people on an org chart or people on a spreadsheet. It's not human person. So I think just really always being intentional about the human person, I think, is key, but in context of people, process, technology.
How can Mcore coaches better draw upon this wonderful narrative-based approach to help people flourish in organizations?
Well, I don't know. I guess ask me in a year. So, I mean, we're just launching this now. I mean, I've been through a 360. I thought it was good for me because I don't care what people think of me. You know, that shows I told you my number 25, 26, and 27, make the grade, evoke recognition, be unique. So people telling me what they don't like about me doesn't really bother me. But I think, you know, Rick Newton, who created MPAC along with Alan Hirsch, we talk about this a lot. I really think that with the labor market the way it is, with the millennials being so hard to manage, in a good way, I think they're challenging, I'm 54, I think they're challenging my generation to step it up. I think that what's happening is we're being forced into a more biblical vision of leadership to flourish as organizations. So I think human flourishing, I almost fell off my chair when my coach Dan Dupuis sent me that Harvard Business Review article with Marcus Buckingham. And then with Lencioni, some of his stuff that he's doing. I just really think that we need to be paying attention to really what I think God is doing. I think that we're in a time where there's biblical truths are being packaged in secular language. New models of leadership are emerging.
That hopefully will lead now into the dignity of each person being more and more cultivated, but organizations flourishing as well.
Right.
It seems that's the direction that we're headed, that you're pointing to. So let's open up the floor for questions. Please feel free to ask questions of Pat, and I'll pay attention to your chats, and then we'll unmute you so you can ask him directly. All right, and I'll have one here as well if people don't forthcome here. Okay, I'm going to unmute everybody. So if you've got ambient noise around you, please go ahead and mute yourselves. But I'd like some response here to Pat's comments, and then also we'll get some questions as well. All right, go ahead. Hey, Mukesh.
Hey, George. Good morning.
So Pat, one of the big challenges that we, I know, have encountered a lot among working with family organizations is there's a layer of family connections beyond the business pressures as well. So talk about the use of understanding motivations in a family context where you're trying to team build as well.
Yeah. You know, thank you, Josh, for asking that question, because I will tell you that I bet it was in 2003. I had a guy who was, Herb Guyad. I don't know if you know if he's still around. He did consulting for family businesses. And he met with my siblings and I, and he said, "I think you guys need to look at this Strengths Finders thing." I'm like, "What's that?" So we deployed it 13 or 14 years later. And I think it is a tool that will help save family businesses from what happens in the third and fourth generation. So I'll give you an example. So my niece, Melissa, came into the business 3.5, maybe a little, incredibly gifted, right? IT background, very high execution skills. And she and I really complement each other. I don't think we have any of the same top 6 or 7 probably don't have any of the top 10 that are the same, I think. So we're way different. And thank God for Joe Cavanaugh, because he immediately, when she came in, I had already been working with him, or just started working with him. And he really helped the two of us learn how to really have this mutually interdependent relationship that has just been unbelievable. And it's helped our business. So we actually had made her our chief operating officer. So I am chief growth officer, she's chief operating officer, and my sister's chief financial officer. So the three of us have learned how to really lean into each other's God-given uniqueness and function as a cohesive unit. It's been a beautiful experience, honestly, Joshua. We get along great, three of us.
You talked about mutual interdependence as critical for healthy team dynamic. Talk more about why that's so critical as opposed to other models where there might be just one strong leader and those that do the will of that leader.
Yeah.
I noticed also here that you don't have one CEO. You all work together as a CEO unit.
Well, I say God is the CEO. That's my answer to that question. So we submit to him and to biblical truths and how we try to function. So I've been trained. Fernando Esquivel, who's on this call, and I went up and got trained by Lencioni's people who do his 5 behaviors. And I believe that his model is excellent. It starts with trust.
Mm-hmm.
But when we do our training, Human Formation Coalition, when we train coaches on strengths and team strengths, we actually put another layer below trust called DNA. And we believe that until you really pay attention to the DNA of the person and the team, and also the DNA of the organization, you will not build sustained long-term cohesive teams. Mm-hmm. People need to learn who they are and who they aren't, identity, and who each other is and how we're all wired individually. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely does. Now, this is from Ed Buquillin. Can Pat expand on how impact allows a person to see their impact on their team? So he says he's interested in giving his executive team a deeper sense of one another in the context of core values and performance goals.
Yeah. Okay. So again, this impact is like brand new. I mean, it's been 2.5 years in the working, and we're in beta. We're only in beta stage, beta testing. So I'm going to give you church context. So I'll use my pastor as an example, who I love. Well, I'm not going to give you his name, but he's wonderful. And on APEST, he would be high shepherd, very caring about the people, high teacher. I'm more like apostolic prophetic. I am like, let's go out and change the world, and let's challenge status quo. And one day after Mass, he came up to me and he said, Pat, I always thought you were crazy, but now that I've been coached through APEST, I understand how you're wired. So in our parish, the vision, we're only early in this stage, is to really be intentional about the apostolic, those who go out, the prophetic, those who challenge status quo, the evangelists, the recruiters, the shepherds, those who care, and he's extremely gifted shepherd, and the teachers. So that's how it works in a church context. In a marketplace context, in terms of actual examples, I mean, I'm hoping that maybe some of these folks on this call can stay in touch with me. You can give them my information, Josh. And when this tool is deployed, you can help us figure out how to do it. Actually, we're going to, God willing, Human Formation Coalition will train coaches on the integration of strengths and impact. We'll see. That's the plan. So.
A question from Deb. She says, I'd love to hear the timing of administering these assessments. How close together, and what's been most advantageous timing-wise?
Yes. Deb, that is a great question, and thank you for asking, because we could talk a long time about that. It's not cookie cutter, but I will tell you one in my book, one non-negotiable is you start with strengths. That's been my experience. Because strengths is catalytic. In the way that Gallup has set up their model, it's really a great vehicle for deep, authentic, appreciative inquiry. You know, one of the challenges I've had, it's easier to coach around strengths than it is on Mcore. I mean, Mcore is an incredible tool. I love it. I use it. It's helped with other tools change my life in context of good coaching, obviously. But one of the challenges I've had with Mcore is you're showing people the shadow sides before you're really going deep into their God-given uniqueness. So what we like to do, my preference with strength finders, is to go deep into their top 5, not even show them the full 34. So really affirm them on their top 5, and that might be 2 or 3 months. And then you take them in through full 34. My game changer, my epiphany with Joe Cavanaugh when he coached me through strengths was when he showed me how I was so low in my execution domain. I mean, it's, discipline, consistency, deliberative, they're all low. And I was like, there you go. This is why I irritate people in my organization. I have no natural talent for execution. So, but he had to really help me unpack my positive traits before he could really speak truth into my life on my negatives. Does that make sense, Josh? Deb?
Yes, that does. I'd love to hear then what's the timing between strength finders and then administering Mcore. Do you find if you do it too close, people get overwhelmed, or that you need to have a sufficient time between them?
That's a really good question. I would say that if you have a good coach, you could do it quickly, but that's rare. If there's a lot of time, I will tell you, in my organization, we probably spent a year and a half on strengths, and then moved into Mcore. But I will tell you, in my church contexts, when we're only working with, say, the pastor, we've taken them through all 3 assessments in 3 or 4 months. Joe took me through all 3 in probably 2 months. And it was catalytic for me, like almost life-changing when I integrated all of them. So.
Question from Rebecca. As you interact with other leaders, either in the business context or church context, what kind of resistance or skepticism do you encounter among those who might be reluctant to consider Mcore StrengthsFinder? And then how do you respond to that resistance?
Yeah, well, I think I said earlier in the call, I think that all the leadership wisdom that we need is in the Bible. And if you look at the parable of the 4 soils, he scattered the seed everywhere, but it only grew 100-fold, 160, 30-fold on certain soil. So the way we built Human Formation Coalition, myself and my collaborators, is we build it in a way that we scatter the seed everywhere, and then we see where it flourishes, and where it flourishes, we go deeper with those particular coaches. So that's how we do our nonprofit. I will tell you that in my organization, that's a great question, because here's another point. So I'm tied into a lot of CEO types. I belong to an organization of Catholic CEOs called Legatus. It's high-level leaders in Catholic contexts, and we talk about a lot of things. And one of my friends tried to deploy this in his business, strengths and Mcore, and it didn't work well with him because he mandated it. I believe in, Mark 4:26, the self-growing seed. You scatter the seed and you see where it takes root and you let it grow and flourish. So I brought in a very gifted coach by the name of Joe Cavanaugh started it with a couple of my people. Then I brought in a local coach to really go into my stores and work with it. And it just kind of grew organically, word of mouth. So it's really about letting people experience it and then see where it goes.
Mm. So if I hear you correctly, Pat, you're saying that you provide opportunity, you throw the seed, you're bountiful like that, but then you pay real attention to who's leaning in, who's growing, who's taking advantage.
Yeah.
And then move on that.
Yeah, let me give you an example. I'll give you a really good example. I'm not going to divulge any names, but there's a priest that we trained as a coach, and a very teachable, incredible young priest in his 30s, trained him. And then, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, this young priest was at a retreat with a bishop of one of the largest dioceses in the country. And he gave his personal testimony to this bishop about how he's had transformation through our ministry and through some other ministries he's involved with. So he's had transformation the last 2 or 3 years. He's trained as a coach. He actually literally, this bishop heard his story and said, I want you to coach me through Strength Finders right here on this retreat. So this priest coached this bishop. The bishop said, I love this stuff. I want to learn more about it. Get me in touch with Pat Molyneaux. So that's how it grows. So I've been in touch with this bishop in a diocese that's one of the largest in the country.
That's great. A lot of fruitfulness. A question from Dana Bow. Where would you advise a leader, Pat? Where would you advise a leader of a startup business to start on a journey of leadership that's different than the MBA way that you've been taught? Yeah,
so I believe, how do I say this? I'm going to be succinct. I believe most leadership development models out there, when I say most, I mean 98% of them, have it backwards. I believe you start with, the MBAs want to start with tips and tricks, best practices. I'm saying start with identity. Who are you and who are you not? Who is your team and who are they not? So you start with identity of you as a person, and then identity of your team, and then you build leadership that's unique to that identity. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Dana, any follow-up?
No, that was really helpful. I'm dealing with a lot of new entrepreneurs, and Pat, I think they are struggling because of that traditional advice that they get. So this is really helpful to hear it validated that you're coming at this a different way and the success you're having and how you're teaching others. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things, and I gotta tell you honestly, like, it's starting to really, I'm starting to get a lot of marketplace people. This wasn't something I mean, even working with priests, I mean, 5 years ago, I would have never dreamt I'm coaching priests and mentoring priests. But now I'm starting to get more and more business leaders come to me and say, hey, I want a different model. So what I'm hoping to do, honestly, is build relationships with people like you all and through Josh. So, you know, God willing, we're going to equip Josh to train people on some of this stuff because I don't have the time. I mean, honestly, my business takes a lot of time, and I have to have relationships with people like Josh and Rick Newton to deliver this content. But I would say stay tuned, because I am committed to building Achieve Potential, my number one motivation. I'm committed to helping entrepreneurs like those you work with achieve their potential. Josh, pull up our website homepage for Human Formation Coalition. I wanted to see the quote on our landing page about, you know, really what makes us tick. In terms of what really makes me tick, you know, my what I would call my missional calling. For those of you who work in Christian context, you can see this. humanformationcoalition.org. There you go.
Can you see it?
So it's the glory of God as a person fully alive. Josh, if you go to the About Us page, scroll up a little bit. I'm sorry, scroll up higher where it says our mission. I'm sorry, down a little more. Down just a couple
I'm being
more.
blocked by video screens and other stuff.
Anyhow, what we're about is unlocking the God-given uniqueness of the human person. Our foundational scripture is Ephesians 2:10, which is, you are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he's prepared for you in advance. So if you really pay attention to Ephesians 2:10, it's really about identity, relationship, mission. For those of you who work in faith contexts, pay attention to Ephesians 2:10, this concept of unlocking the masterpiece of the person. I believe that marketplace organizations that learn this will win the talent wars that we're facing right now. I mean, right now we have never been in such a war. Those of us who lead businesses have never been in such a war for talent as we are now.
What do you mean by that? And how does this approach of looking at design solve the problem?
I think that the kind of the hierarchical military model of leadership where it's command and control, what I was formed in is a model from a bygone era. I think that we need to really look at the biblical vision of leadership. You know, and Tim Keller, the pastor from New York, does a great job on defining leadership as stewardship. You know, Adam and Eve were given dominion, but not ownership in the garden. They're called to steward resources for the flourishing. So I believe that we need to move from leadership as controlling and manipulating to leadership as stewardship. I mean, so we have 100 employees. We do $20 million a year in revenue at Molyneaux. And each of these 100 employees has gifts and talents that the Lord has given them. They're made in his image. And how do I steward that for the glory of God as one of the leaders of this organization?
Great. Okay, wonderful. Other questions? There's been such a diversity of questions, and we've gone in various areas, which I kind of anticipated working with you, Pat. You know, we might plunge into the unexpected here, which has been great. But other questions as well.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Please, Mukesh.
I have a question from Pat. So in Catholic Church, there is a specific component of in the seminary is called spiritual formation, where priests and nuns are taken through a process of self-discovery, understanding their identity and calling. But I have kind of interviewed about 100 priests and nuns in India. And I found even after going through that experience, and the training is ranging from 10 years through 15 years, most of them, more than 90% of them, had no idea about their particular calling. So there was, I found that there is some problem in the system itself, how they are trying to, find out their calling, how they're helping. So this is number one problem. And number two problem, in the Protestant church, there is no concept of helping individuals, these people who are doing the Bachelor of Theology or MDiv, understand who they really are. There is no spiritual formation concept. So how, as you are, you are leading an ecumenical organization. So what challenges have you gone through already in the Catholic Church? Because I come not from the Catholic background. So, and how somebody from the Protestant background can convince the Catholic clergy that the system that has not worked so far will of course not work in the future. So there needs to be some calibration required. And then we can bring in new system. At the same time, I can enthuse the Protestant church that this is the most important thing, because millions or billions of dollars which has come in India, in the name of church planting and the kingdom, has gone wasted, because the guy who was sent as a church planter was not really a church planter. He was a good teacher or a pastor. So that's been the challenge. So I'm really inspired what the Lord has been doing in you and through you.
Yeah, I'm going to say something, Josh. We have limited time, but I could spend 1 full-hour webinar on this topic for your Mcore coaches. So this might be a good follow-up, Josh. We'll talk about that offline.
Sure.
But just to give them kind of an overview of what that 1 hour webinar would look like if these folks want to come back. Josh, if you could scroll down and show the 4 pillars of formation? Okay, right there, perfect, stop. So Pope John Paul II, who I believe was a prophet, he was prophetic, in 1992 put out a document called Pastores Dabo Vobis, I will give you shepherds. And he identified 4 dimensions of faith formation: spiritual, relationship with God; intellectual, the scriptures, doctrine; human, who I am as a person; and pastoral apostolic, which is my missional calling, going out. And what we have done is we've negated, first of all, you can't even go into pastoral apostolic, and this is a problem in the Protestant church too, until you deep dive into human formation and identity. So I will tell you, let me tell you a story about me, and this is an example. So we started one of the most robust, I'm highly apostolic prophetic in my style, so we started one of the most robust men's ministries in the country. We'd get 2,000, 1,500 men a day at a one-day event, Bible studies everywhere. We had 80 Bible studies across the diocese. And I could not hold a Bible study for the life of me. I just couldn't sit still. I was bored. I wasn't very good at it. And my team would say, how could you be the leader of this organization, not lead a Bible study? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just dysfunctional. I don't know. I can't do it. I'm not good at it. They were projecting themselves onto me. But what I learned is that my leadership style is more apostolic prophetic than shepherd. So I believe, to answer your question, I believe the genius is right there in the first 16 verses of Ephesians. If we can really start to pay attention to how all 5 of those ministry styles function, the church will transform the temporal order, all the mountains of influence. So I would say that, you know, whether, Josh, we do it on your platform or Human Formation Coalition, maybe on your platform, we should probably do another webinar to really talk about the people who want to go deeper into the faith context around APEST, Ephesians 4, maybe even bring Alan Hirsch into that conversation as well, because I really believe that the church will be reformed when it discovers how to really unleash all 5 of those typologies.
All right. Well, we're at time here. Pat, give us a final word about what Mcore coaches can do to just further utilize their training in this, you know, wonderful narrative-based approach to bring organizational transformation in the ways that you've described. We've gone in various areas, but what's a summary word from you?
Summary word is, I really believe that those of you who are doing this, those of you who are aligned with Joshua, I know his vision. He's a pioneer, especially in the faith-based space. I mean, the stuff his book Unrepeatable it's prophetic. So I think that all of you, whether you're Christian or you're not Christian, are transforming the culture because you're paying attention to the DNA of the person. So I want to just affirm you to continue to lean in and just keep plugging away. You're making a difference in the world by focusing on the person.
Good. Thank you, Pat. Now, for those of you who are here, I'm going to provide, actually, I'll put in the chat bar. Well, Pat, which email address should I use for you?
Yeah, I use my company email address, which is P Molyneaux, Molyneaux, P Molyneaux. If any experiment with impact, let me look at my chat box. I don't have it up. P Molyneaux at beautifulfloors.com. If any of you are going to experiment with impact, the impact tool, my cell number is 412-400-1002. The creators of that tool are dear friends, and I am helping them ideate around it. And I think Molyneaux may be one of the first marketplace organizations to try to deploy it. We'll see how that works.
One more question, Pat. I want to make sure that we get, for those of you who need to get off, I understand. But how about time? When you get to the point where you're using Mcore with coaches or with employees or with those that you're coaching, even in ministry context, what's the time spent on Mcore and on then integrating that with the other approaches?
Yeah, really good question. We probably spend maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours on strengths, for every hour on Mcore, and Mcore and APEST are about the same. APEST, it's in that range, maybe 2 to 1, and then strengths to Mcore 2 to 1,
Mm-hmm.
and then APEST and Mcore are about the same.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Great. Thanks so much, Pat. I really appreciate your time. And for those of you who are here, appreciate your interaction as well. Thanks so much. Please reach out to me for any follow-up questions, and then also for a recording link if you'd like that. I'll be in touch soon. All the best.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much, Pat.